Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Mitch, I know we're looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. That's how she became the nanny.
Yay, Fran Drescher. Who would have ever thought that I'd be cheering the nanny?
I know, it was like, I was thinking, like, where has she been? Yeah, that's where she's been.
Yeah. And
representing SAG-AFTRA.
And they elected her, meaning she had to campaign for it. She had to be political to start with. Very interesting. And now all we need is for equity to get its act together, which would be really nice.
Oh,
I went right there. I'm sorry.
Sick burn, bro. No. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford.
Mitch Weiss.
And let's get down to business. We've taken a little bit of a break because we're allowed to.
We have been in rehearsal. We have been working. We have had good reason that all deals with theater. So,
absolutely, I know. Yeah, even though we're not here, and I know you miss our voices and our witty banter, but we've had a lot going on. I closed the season. My first season at Theater Exile. I was very excited about that.
It was a wonderful season. Let's hope your next one's as good, as better. It will
was.
Be. I went into rehearsal. I have 4 shows in rehearsal at the same time. So it's I would say it's overwhelming, but it's not. I think working on Broadway trains you for this. You know, it's 24/7 no matter what. So why not divide it up?
Right? Yeah. I mean, you are running a theater company.
Yeah.
I mean, you may as well submit the paperwork, get it done.
See, but
maybe hire an intern or 2.
Been there, done that. And let's take one moment out. You know how they say you always have to glorify a stage manager or a company manager or something? Let's glorify some of these interns. The truth is, the work would be so much harder. Even though they're learning, they're being mentored, they do things that make our lives easier. And when you get smart ones, which is 90% of the time, you want to hire them as soon as the internship's over. Unfortunately, they have work at school to go back to, or they can't afford to work for the kind of prices you're paying your interns. That's really the trick.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to, we're sliding into the union thing. We'll get there. But it all comes down to, why do we know why we work for next to nothing. And that doesn't mean we always do, but we're willing to. Because the creative forces, not only within us, but how we get the work that does pay us, requires more time than any job could pay for. The starting with a script, those poor writers, then having someone say, oh yeah, it's a good idea, but we need a whole different revision, and you have to take your leading character, throw it out, change the theme, change the century it's in, come back to us next week with a new script, and we'll consider it. Then they come back, and they say, don't have time for this, maybe we'll consider it next year. So you put it on the back burner while you try to write something else, on and on and on. These writers, it's not like they just sit down, do a week's worth of work, and come up with a script, especially these TV film writers.
Oh, by the way, you're on a non-compete.
That's right, you can't work anywhere else. But it's even worse. I mean, they literally are coming up with their own ideas, and they're going to be accused in some cases of plagiarism. And we haven't even started with AI yet. which
Hmm.
an interesting thought. Someone said it's not artificial intelligence, it's artificial plagiarism, because every
Yeah.
part of its intelligence is based on something that somebody else has already written.
Hmm.
And it does know how to piece it all together. Good for it. But, and there are people suing right now. I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place.
AI's response would just be like, "I'm sorry, I was just stealing like an
That's it.
artist."
And that's true. The old, for anyone in the audience who may be old enough, Milton Berle was famous for stealing everyone else's jokes. And he admitted it, and the other comics would accuse him of it, but lovingly, because that's what he did for a living, was steal other people's jokes. And he made it his own funny. Um,
It's like an
yeah,
honor. It's an honor to have my jokes stolen by.
music's the same way. There's no, come on, there are 12 notes in a scale. You cannot be
Yeah.
totally original. Something is always going to have some reference to some other music, even if it's Eastern scales, tonal scales. So here we go. Everything is borrowed
Hmm.
to some extent. Is how do you make it feel original? How do you produce it in such a way? Anyway, the trick is that nobody is getting paid even minimum wage as a writer. And here we
Yeah.
are with people saying you don't even deserve minimum wage after we accept your script.
And also, because this is going on in other businesses too, when they're trying to get people to return back to the office in a full-time capacity. There were so many like particulars about like, oh, if our office is downtown, and if you don't come downtown anymore and you work remotely, then technically we should be able to pay you less money. Or some people had those kind of situations, and now they want them to come back to the office, and everybody's so used to working the way that they've worked, probably because they realized, I wasn't getting paid very well to begin with, and but now that I have my time back, this feels more balanced. So you're still trying to get much more time out of me for the money, you're
Well, yeah. Now,
offering.
now we're going back. The days when hate to bring up a car company, but Chrysler um, went through a period of time where all the car companies, but this was particularly because I think Chrysler was going bankrupt at the time. They were all comparing themselves to Japan, which quote unquote had better, more productive workers. Supposedly
Hmm.
they were productive and Americans were relatively lazy, which is a complete insult and wrong. And people were arguing back and forth. But what happened is the compromise is okay, you give us a little more money and you can have more of our time. So then people start saying, wait a minute, I don't see my family. Wait a minute, I am getting a little bit more money, but now I'm exhausted. And our productivity increased, at least according to what I read from the government reports in those days. But now we lost quality of life if we had it before. I'm not that old. I don't know what it was like back then. But it's important to realize that the fact that when you go to work, even if you go to an office, we are not padlocked in the office, and it's hard for younger people to realize that before I was born, but not that long before, people were actually padlocked in their warehouses or in their factories and not allowed out.
Wow.
And that's why there were deaths, because there were fires and all the doors were locked. And that was a very famous situation. Of course, this is a long time ago, but it's within 100 years. I mean, we're not talking
Hmm.
about hundreds of years ago. This is American workforce. They had children 10 years old working in these factories. They had women sewing. I will say the first office that I got by myself for my own company, I was in a building with two sweatshops in New York City. They were still sweatshops.
Wow.
Now, we didn't know it at first, but the landlord knew it, and he said he was trying to kick them out, but you have legalities. How do you kick out someone who's paying the rent? So, all these different situations, and we take it for granted that the situations we have now, even, we're arguing, but each time we argue, they get better. Maybe. Right? Maybe.
The hope that they get
right.
better.
We're not padlocked. There are bathrooms now at some of the offices.
Well, if anything, we shine a light on it.
And so here we are with SAG-AFTRA, and more importantly for me, nothing against actors, believe me, but the Writers Union is where it started. The Writers Guild. I wish I knew all the details, what they wanted, what has been offered. They do keep this stuff somewhat secret. So I don't know where the real bullet points are. But to go out on strike is not a small thing. I know in my union, I've brought up a few times, are we ready to go on strike? And when the members say, oh, no, look, we want to fight this, we do want to fight, but no, we're not going to strike. Our employers are still our colleagues, and let's try to work this out. And I'll be honest with you, some of the things that we were hoping for when I first got in my union, we're still trying to get. And that is 40 years ago. And we still haven't gotten them in our working conditions. So the question is, when do you strike? How bad does it really have to be to convince people to lose their income? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
But like I said, you and I, we don't know the details. So I'm hesitant to bring up point by point.
Yeah, I just from what I heard, they came with receipts, so they were talking about like, here's the amount of money we're asking for. It was something like $400 million, or something.
Who was asking for $400 million?
The WGA.
Oh, I mean the total that it would cost.
Or
not per person.
Adjustments were.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean so the number, like they would say what they're asking for and what it amounts to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would say like versus what the CEOs are making.
Right.
And and I think it is kind of interesting because I'm sure everybody has. There's a whole organization in place to represent the production, the studios, in this, and so it almost seems like the CEOs don't need to say anything at all.
They don't. The people who are anti.
No, and they shouldn't. It's not even in their best interest to comment on it.
Now the issue is, and I don't mean to make everybody laugh in the audience, but the truth is that people want to work, and the people in charge are anti-union without a specific reason other than we want to pay as little as we can to get what we need. There is no particular reason for being anti-union, no ethical reason, right? The people who, in Congress also, the people who are trying to make it harder to be in unions or whatever, the purpose of a union, let's be clear for those who don't know, there are really only three items. Pay scale, the minimum pay scale, by the way. You can get paid more. Certainly whoever writes the script for a Steven Spielberg movie makes more than minimum, right? So we're not talking about them. They're not the ones we're worried about. We're talking about the people, first-time people in. They get to write some, a sitcom and write a couple of, scripts for it. These people will be paid at the minimum that the union has set and that the producers have agreed to pay. So we have that. Uh, the problem after that is healthcare and pension. Those are the three items.
Mm.
The unions, when they talk about all these other things, that's not their priority. Priority set a minimum that if you come into this business, you're not going to make less than this amount for each script or for your time on a show, or if they work you till midnight, you should get overtime because you're working 16 hours as opposed to someone who works 8 hours. These are the kinds of things that they work on. Then they want to make sure that when you get to the age of 65 or whatever age they set, you have a pension. You can pay for your family when you have Social Security. And they also want to make sure before you can get Medicare that you have health insurance. Now, every union has a different health plan. Some of them you have to work a lot to even be eligible. Some of them you don't. Again, each time you negotiate a contract, the needle moves. But after that, we're not talking about somebody saying, well, I want to make sure my computer is a higher grade of Apple. That doesn't come up. It doesn't say, I want to make sure the bathroom has gold-plated toilet bowls.
But you can't be a writer without an Apple computer.
Oh, is that what that is?
Can't.
Okay.
Just can't. No.
Come on. You got to do a just like they say, such and such book company is owned by our mother company. You have to explain yourself.
Fruit-themed Apple company.
For being
fruit-themed
that you used
company.
To work for Apple.
Oh, I used to work for the fruit-themed technology company, now media company.
Anyway, what would you ask for? I mean, especially now we're in the world of streaming. Of course, that's how things change. That's what this is about.
Well, I mean, I'm just paying attention to what is being said by the members. And so the members are saying, like, our wages have not kept in pace with inflation. And so I feel like that's sort of the first, like the low-hanging fruit. It's like, acknowledge inflation and adjust accordingly. I know that that's easier said than done, but I feel like that's where you should be looking at this, because those numbers won't lie. Like, it is what it is. And I don't know what they think. Like, oh, this will pass, and then your minor ducats will be fine. Be more than satisfactory. But the thing is, like, it seemed like some of the conversation was saying, like, on average, a writer in the WGA, like a base writer, probably, when it's all said and done, made about $70,000. At the end of the year. But their money came far and few between. It wasn't all consistent. And they live in, they have to live in Los Angeles in order to work.
And have a car and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got to get around. So their expenses and everything like that is fine for... I honestly, it's not even fine for one person, but it might be manageable for one person. But if you get to LA, I'd imagine that amount of money allows you to have several roommates and live outside of LA.
Well, it's a great point, because one of the major issues in our industry, whether it's theater or whether it's film and TV, and they are very different, of course, but our work is not consistent. The suits who run the studios or run the theaters, their work is 52 weeks. They're not the ones covered by the unions. But a show, bringing it back to theater, if a show opens and closes in 8 weeks, you've got to find a new job. The stagehands, who have always been the scapegoat for every high-priced ticket, and it's not their fault, not even close. Their argument is, we have families, we have a small home, we live outside the city, we have to commute in, and I just worked my butt off for 8 weeks and now I'm unemployed. I still have to figure out how to keep a base living to work in this industry. So the minimum wage is based on the fact that you won't be working 52 weeks a year. If you're lucky enough to get Phantom of the Opera and you want to stay in the same job, which of course is not a creative way to live, we like hopping around from project to project, but if you want to, if you're going to accept a show that's long running, well then great, you can be a little more affluent. You're still not rich. And all the unions are doing is, again, it's the base pay. They do not negotiate for rich people. But the people they're negotiating against are usually, and I don't want to make a blanket statement, they're usually rich. And they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. One of the embarrassments, and now I'm going to bring it back to theater, nonprofits, I had no idea until the pandemic. The CEOs of nonprofits who are begging people, that's my word, who are requesting donations from people. A lot of the bigger ones in New York or in major cities, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, guaranteed employment. And then the pandemic hit, and we found out that their employees were making minimum wage, hourly minimum wage, and some of them were being denied health care, some of them because they're not unionized. Nonprofit theaters, except for the very large ones, they are not unionized. So their employees can be right out of college. They can say, you're working on the hours we want. We can change your hours next week. We can decide you're laid off for 2 weeks and then we want you back. They can do anything they want to these people. And many of them, even though in my knowledge, it's against the law, many of them hire interns and pay them nothing. They have ushers and pay them nothing. All the ushers do is get to see the show that night. And I get it. There's not a lot of money at the level of a lot of these nonprofits, so that I understand that. But when you're paying your CEO $250,000 a year, then I have a problem. And that's where the unions come in my less than humble opinion. But there are many, like the younger theaters, the ones that are struggling to just get themselves off the ground, no issue. We're all working for free. This is doing it for love. So I'm not arguing for them. This is when you're at that point that you can afford to pay somebody that $250,000. You should be able to afford to pay a living wage for some of your employees. And it hasn't happened yet. That's the amazing thing. We have these unions and we keep thinking, well, wait a minute. Someone wrote for Seinfeld. What do you mean they didn't make a bunch of money for that 30-minute show, actually 22 minutes?
20.
Which they may have spent a year writing before it was accepted. And they get it accepted, and they made some money, but maybe they don't work again.
Yeah.
So now you've made $20,000. I don't know. I'm not aware of the exact numbers on television. I could tell you the theater numbers, not television. But let's say they make that. You still can't live off of that in Los Angeles, right? So and that's union minimum that they're making. And so at a certain point, they're saying, but now you're showing Seinfeld 7 days a week on 4 different streaming platforms, and I'm not making a penny from it, but you are. And you're making $500,000 a year salary. Why can't I make more than $20,000 for having written that episode? That's my guts is really where the question is. And I wish they would explain it on layman's terms like that, and show us some of these people. They're not. You're just making it seem like we have a bunch of rich movie actors and they're going on strike.
Yeah. Richard Kind had done an interview and he said, and I've heard this before, he said, you get paid to wait. Mm-hmm. You get paid to wait. The acting is free.
It's a great line. Yeah. And the truth is, I just came from a rehearsal today. And for me, it it gets tense when you realize you have, let's say, 4 actors in a room, and for the half hour of that, you really only need 2 of them because you're working on a particular song or a particular part of a scene. And the other 2 are doing nothing. They're sitting, well, they know how to work on their own. But basically, you're not using them. And I feel bad that I'm using up their time because they're getting paid bupkis, right? I mean, if it's on Broadway, you just sit there, right? They're paying me for the day. I'm going to sit here. But so much of what we do is we can't work with everyone all the time. You have to know your own craft. You have to, when you're on your own, sit there with your script or your song and study on your own and know how to do that. And we all depend on each other to know how to do that. Well, that's what an actor on a sitcom is doing. They're in their trailer or wherever, their dressing room, and they're studying their script so that when they get out there, they know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, because everything happens so fast, and if they're not prepared, then everybody's got to reset, and so many people who are, ready for you to deliver your lines, I mean, I'm sure everybody respects everyone's part of the process, but I can imagine how frustrating that would be if you've got all the lights set and you've got everything, camera rolling, and then you're just not in the headspace, and you're like, I'm sorry, can we take 14? Like, we can't keep doing this. We're gonna have to move on. It is what it is.
A very an actor who was in the room when Meryl Streep was working on a particular scene, I think he said they did, and they had to stop her, but they did over 40 takes of 4 lines because she wasn't satisfied with the way she had done it. That's expensive. On the other hand, she won an Oscar. So the question is that worth it for the movie and the cost? But
trust the process.
That's it. I read a great line today from John Cleese, Monty Python actor who's done many things, British actor. And he just said, I don't understand why everyone has to go on strike. We have talented people. We all know we like working with each other. We all are collaborative. He said, it's the executives. They don't have any talent. Why are we paying them? Now, he's being funny, right, and exaggerating because the executives...
He's making a valid
right, and especially because they are making so much more than 90%, if not more, of the actors. The writers, on the other hand, I can't tell you how many theater writers I know who think, well, if I'm going to spend a year of my life writing a script and then have it rejected, I might as well at least hope for the kind of money that they pay in Hollywood rather than on Broadway. Because Broadway pays even less, unless you have a monster hit. Believe me, that we all make money if you have a hit.
That breaks even.
Yeah, there you go.
And how fast does it break even before you start turning a profit? Yeah.
So I don't know. What do we do about the one more thing before I let you answer that question? The sadness is, and I challenge us all to notice that when the strike is over, on both the actors and the writers, checking on what it is that they did not get from their request. What did the producers get by holding out? All they did, my guess is there will be almost nothing that they don't get. And, maybe instead of making a 3% cost of living increase, they got a 2.78% cost. It will be worthless. The producers don't seem to have a particular issue that's important to them other than let's not pay them for a while. Let's just torture them a little bit. Now, this is what it looks like to me. I don't want, I've been on the producing end, just so I'm clear about this. And as a manager, I represent producers on Broadway. So I get it. There's money that needs to be saved and money that you need to watch. I'm very proud that I've never gone over budget on anything that I've worked on. Um, so sometimes you have to say no. But when you're negotiating with people that who are going worried about AI, which now should be the topic we talk about, and worried about residuals going into streaming, it seems like these are topics you want to talk about. It's affecting us all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and ultimately their conversation is about something that hasn't quite become an issue yet, and so they want to get ahead of it. It's like, don't we remember Napster? I mean, like, don't we remember? Like, look at the past disruption, and it was because we were unprepared, and we sat comfortably, like people whose cheese would not move, And it's just like and so they want to get ahead of this, and let me like, wait a minute, and I've been following Fran Drescher a bit, and there was an interview she did recently where she was saying they're conditioning the audience now to watch limited series. We started with anthologies where it's like, oh, so this won't be a recurring. This cast will be regular for this season, but it'll be a whole new cast next season. Otherwise, we have to pay them more. And we're looking at it like, oh, wow, they're going to refresh the cast. That'll be great. We get to see some new exciting people in these roles, like still in the world that they've created. And I thought about it back to Doctor Who.
Good
Doctor
example.
Who had Doctor Who had a structure. The first Doctor, was getting old, and they didn't really give it any thought. And it's like, this show is a hit, but we can't continue with this actor forever. So what are we going to do? And so they built in a regeneration so that they could recast. And they're like, that's so clever. And so we're just thinking about how creative they were with storytelling, but not really thinking about how that's like, I don't know.
Well, let me do a bit of digression here. The Annie rule is bringing it back to theater. When Annie first hit Broadway, because a bunch of little girls and a dog on stage, right? Well, the problem is if you have a long-running hit, the little girls grow up to be big girls. There were no rules set on equity contracts about firing someone because they were old or got heavier or taller.
Wow.
So the Annie rule, and this is where negotiations with good-minded people happen. They sat down and they came up with what is known as the Annie rule, which by the way, because I worked on Annie too, on it was called Annie Warbucks. And at the beginning, we took their weight, their height, and their age, had the parents sign that this was the correct whatever, and the rule, and I may get this wrong, I think it says if one of the little girls or little boys gains 10 pounds or more, the producer has the right to replace them. If they grow 3 inches or more, they are allowed to replace them. These exact numbers are in there now. And just acknowledging that you have parts that are for youngsters. And if they're not young anymore, they can't play it. That we don't have that for older people, but we do have it for kids. So you can there are valuable moments that come out of negotiations when there are people of going into this trying to solve a problem rather than beat somebody up. So we have a new problem. Let's talk about television. If I get this right, and again, please forgive me because I don't work in TV. The old rule was if a show makes it to its 6th year, in, whether it's syndication or on the network, and goes into reruns, automatically the actors are now on a certain residual payment schedule. So for every rerun, they will get X amount. But the show has to make it to its 6th year. Before that, the networks didn't even want to rerun the show. Well, now if you're doing streaming and you're doing anthologies or short-term miniseries or whatever you're calling it, none of these rules will have effect because no one's in the show long enough. Again, the producers are saying, aha, we are not going to have to pay for reruns if we decide to rerun it 4 million times on our streaming network.
And again, so us being excited about, snap, like Disney has everything all in one place. So I can just go to Disney Plus, or I can watch it later on Hulu. And it's like, yes, but okay. And, let's go to theater for a second. Hamilton was on Disney Plus. So it's like, that's great. We get to watch Hamilton. And now if you watch it over and over and over again, what happens?
The actors don't. The actors got paid for it.
But they got paid once.
They got paid once. And that's because, and I don't know this for sure, but I know that SAG-AFTRA and Equity have an agreement of which contract are we going. Are we going to follow SAG-AFTRA or are we going to follow Equity? And during the pandemic, the rules changed. And then some of them went back. And now it's a hybrid. And that's the reason I'm going to express ignorance over this. The actors were paid just to have Hamilton filmed. And that was before the Hamilton people knew what they were going to do with it. That's an Equity rule. This is how much you have to pay if you film anything, and the actors get paid. Then the question is, what do we do with it? And I don't know what the rules are for that. And I plan to, now that we've brought it up, I will call my friend who's the manager of Hamilton, and I'm going to find out because I'm interested. I think he'll tell me. As long as I...
Is that Brig?
That's Brig. Yay, Brig Bernie. Yeah. We're saying hi to Brig Bernie.
Yeah, Brig Bernie. Hey, Brig Bernie.
But now he becomes a spy, and I'm not sure they're going to let him tell us, so he's going to want to tell us the details.
Come on the show, Brig Bernie. Yeah. That would be amazing.
He would probably just say, I don't really know that part.
Okay. So here's my other thought about the strikes. And this is really what I was thinking about. What do we do, or what should we do? Because there's so many ways that we patronize the very studios that are in this battle. You may be a shareholder. You may have stock in the company. Like, do you maintain your position or do you cash out? Or you just might be a fan who's waiting for, who's really trying to do the Barbenheimer, Barbie and Oppenheimer double feature. Right. And you're like, yeah, but I mean, I know kind of they all got paid already. And so I'm thinking about like Only Murders in the Building is coming back in August, and they're promoting it right now, but it's like, it's already in the can. So it's like, how much of this, are we not helping by, continuing to consume all of this and demanding all the new stuff?
The studios know that they have the power because they can, if they wait to the last second, they can still say, great, we're going to hire 1,400 of you instead of 700 of you, and we're going to run and get everything done and catch up. Or we've trained our audience to just watch a bunch of reruns. Either way, because television's changing. I mean, how we watch it. So all of that.
And they've probably produced something that did not make it to air yet. And they could decide at any time, you know what, we're going to greenlight that show we shelved 3 years ago, see if it holds up. And if not, it's just going to be a new series that'll have one season.
Well, the other thing which is interesting is talking about the ethical problem for the rest of us. You look at the talk shows. They are still live. They're still doing it because they're under a different contract. The question is, at what point are they, just by their existence, helping keep everyone out of work? On the other hand, I guarantee you it's because in their contract, it says you're not allowed to strike if this is what happens. That, because, for example, any talk show, what if just one person on that talk show says, you know what, I'm not going in. I don't want to do this while there's a strike. I am in solidarity. Well, why would...
Yeah, like they're crossing the picket line every day.
So why is no one doing that? It's got to be in their contract, and they would lose their job automatically. So the question then is, but should they do it anyway? Then the question is, why are the producers saying, well, good, we don't have to pay anybody, we just keep using stuff in the can? They're eventually going to need to pay people for new stuff. Maybe, and have no knowledge of this, have to keep putting that disclaimer in there, maybe they're saying, the status of television with AI, with streaming, maybe cable's going away. Maybe we're going to help move this along, and what we're planning to do in the next 6 months means we're going to need a whole different playing field. So let's get as many people as we can out of the way while we make these what they call hardware changes. By the way, that was something the music industry used in the 1980s with Michael Jackson. They started calling him and Madonna software. And their hardware was, we're moving from 8-tracks and cassettes, from CDs, and now we're going to be in a kind of a Spotify situation. They knew where they were going. They wrote about it. It was not a secret. But they were calling their talent software. So now I wonder, if the studios are that far ahead of us and they're just keeping quiet and we're not hearing any of the inside banter of what they're really hoping for, which is let's change the entire system of how we send out television and film programs. Look, they're no longer using movie theaters the way they used to, right? A lot of their stuff premiered on some streaming service, and sometimes they do use movie theaters. How is the payment system for that going to change? Maybe it's going to be a radical change. And again, bringing it back to theater, maybe that's what we need to do with our nonprofits. That right now, nonprofits are going, we just have to sell tickets and we have to ask for money from our donors. Well, maybe we need a bigger change. We're still doing theater. That's not going to change. But how do we present it? How do we pay for it? How much do we spend on it? And we cut Broadway out of this because the Broadway system, I don't think anybody's ever going to change.
Should we invite that carnival into the courtyard?
There you go. Absolutely.
It does not fall in line with our mission.
Do we do pool tournaments in in our theater, like Tuesday afternoons? We bring in sharks, pool sharks. Let them play some game, have something, and maybe we find out that there's an entire group of people, darts, right, who will come in for 2 hours and pay $10. We're making this up as we go along.
So the theater on the weekend is a speakeasy now.
Yeah.
You have to get the code. The code is sent over Instagram stories, and it will disappear in 24 hours.
There you go.
If you do not have it, you can knock it in.
But the hardest question is there an audience for any of this? And we don't have the answer for that. It's always the hardest thing.
Honestly, there is an audience who just always wants something new.
That's true.
And they just want to be able to say that they've been there.
But and look, we now have a situation, at least here on the news in New York, they're talking about that people are leaving at 4 when the ones who do come in from the office are leaving at 4. There's kind of having that we're not going to get anything worthwhile done after 4 o'clock. So all of a sudden they're sneaking out, or when they're at home, they stop work at 4. Maybe they pick up work again at 9 or 10 at night because they can deal with their children and have dinner with the family in between. All these reasons coming up. Maybe now we have a 4 o'clock, hey, I want some entertainment. We don't know where this is a transition period. Lord knows theater is not making enough to pay for itself, with the exception
Yeah.
of the blockbusters. The same with the movies, right? Tom Cruise, I was shocked that he only took in 80 million this week. You know, that movie I'm sure cost hundreds of millions, and that's it. You know, it's about what I think he's
Yeah,
used to making, but
and the promotion for it was like the best movie ever.
right? Yeah.
Tom Cruise's best work. Swan song. Like, I don't know.
And on the other hand, if Broadway were to bring Tom Cruise to sit on a stage and read you a letter he wrote to the president for 10 minutes, that could sell out at $1,000. I mean, we don't know. And it's a complete crapshoot.
I will say one thing, and then we'll wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when they were playing around with the technology to do a hologram of Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm. And they did it.
And and it's like, would you go to a hologram concert of Michael Jackson? And then I was thinking about it. I'm like, no. I mean, some of these, like, you can't, the intimacy of some of these films, like, you just can't create with, robots.
Maybe. And well, maybe we haven't figured out how to do it yet. Right? And the truth is, I bet you that if they had that hologram of Michael Jackson in Las Vegas, they could sell it out, depending on the size of the theater, and make some money. You wouldn't go, I wouldn't go. Luckily, though, we were old enough to see Michael Jackson. Yeah. What about the people who didn't?
But don't you think it's kind of like this? Like, the reason we can't get rid of oil altogether is because of the infrastructure that is attached to it. It's like, sure, it makes sense to have electric vehicles, maybe, but look at all of the things that would shut down because we don't have oil. Well, and so
you're arguing that change is slow, which is a horrible argument.
It's slow on purpose. But what I'm saying is that, like, if you start to use AI to tell stories, like, then you're going to marginalize a program at a college that teaches writers how to write. You're going to say, like, what's the point of going to an acting class when we can just scan your body, like, and then let the technology do the rest. And so again, there was this argument about what is it, sort of like a basic minimum wage for everyone, because, like, all this technology is making it harder for people. Like, it doesn't make sense to pay people to do some of these jobs because technology can do it. And if you're going to do that, then how do people live?
Well,
and so if you rush that to the stage, you're going to disrupt much more than the little bit that you're going to financially gain.
Well, that's always, and then you can look at all social issues. When everyone argues, what do you mean? It'll take time. We have to change people's hearts. We have to teach them this. We have to that. I think, without trying to sound too cliche, for some people, quick change is good, and for others, it's horrible. We do have a society that might be able to allow for both to happen. That the overall transition is not everyone has to do everything the same way. So if there is an AI arts program, that doesn't mean there aren't people who are not going to want to partake, and who are going to go the old way. The same thing, we do have an environmental problem, so we're trying to lower our dependence on gas. It would be nice to get rid of it, but just lowering it for as many people as possible becomes the answer.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we're going to get rid of everything. people's jobs are affected, people's homes. The fact that people aren't willing to change their own minds, it's like, well, go ahead. You don't have to have a gas stove, right? I mean, it's not a giant thing. So, but
Oh no.
yeah,
Oh no. You're not cooking if you don't have a gas stove, okay? You're not cooking.
right.
I can tell you, unless you have a gas stove.
Yeah.
I know that used to be a thing. Now there's convection.
Right, convection
and
ovens.
everything, and you're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, this is so much better. Or yeah.
And
it's
then
so
who do
crazy.
you convince to do it, and what age do they do it, and which state do they live in? The old phrase, different strokes for different folks. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people. I don't like to be forced into anything, but I do like when something makes sense to me. I don't like it being a slow change, but it has to make sense.
Yeah. I mean, so there's something about there is justifiable urgency,
Yeah.
in some cases.
And if
in many
somebody
cases.
wants to fight it, as
Change is
long as
coming.
it's a small group or you allow for it, then we're not being our dictatorship. There are social issues that I would disagree with what I just said.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Well, it's going to take time. We never solve anything, and we're out of time. So
we didn't
that's
sing.
the business.
We did not sing.
I know. You should. The last few minutes, I was thinking. I was like, I can't pull a song out of this.
Oh, come on.
Maybe
let's
it's because we're talking about WGA and SAG-AFTRA. Even though SAG-AFTRA, I should.
You brought up
there.
MJ. Sing a Michael Jackson. Beat it.
No.
Okay.
It's so organic. It has to happen.
Okay.
I'm sorry if you were waiting for me to drop a couple of bars before we get sued. Not today. I didn't even reference.
No.
Well, I did talk about Hamilton.
And I brought up Annie.
Annie, yeah.
I just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
You're not going to get me to even listen to a song from Annie.
Well, we'll make up for it. I'll make up for it in the next episode because, of course, the strike is still going on. We'll continue to follow it. But,
I wish there was something we all could do. You know what? The old days where they said write a letter. It truly is surprising, a snail mail letter to a studio executive telling them that you side with, if you do, you side with the writers or the actors or both, is actually effective. They really do notice it, because having been on the other side, when things show up at your desk, emails mean nothing, because all you do is delete them. You don't have time for them. You do business.
No.
Right? But the snail
mail. You have to have a formal letter or an invoice.
Right. Just send them a short thing that said, I agree with, and just send it to, studio president Walt Disney, studio president Paramount, studio president. Google their address and send it. That's something we can do.
I'm just going to send them one blank sheet of paper. It's not blank. Just one sheet of paper. It's going to say, I stan WGA and SAG-AFTRA.
There you go. And as long as they get a good amount of them, it will matter. They're not going to read the details, so it's really irrelevant. All right.
They need T-shirts.
They have T-shirts. Haven't you seen them online?
I know, but they got to sell them to us.
They're available.
Talk us into
They're available. You
All
can
right,
go on.
we'll find a link.
All right,
we'll find a link. This WJI strike. Well, that's the business of theater. A working title. I'm Darnell Radford.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
And we'll
see you soon.
See you at the theater?
Yeah, we will. The theater is still there. Go buy a ticket.
We'll see you at the theater, and we have more to talk about, so tune in next week as we tell you what we're up to.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.